when I saw that, was like, of course, if you can ask why not, or what else could we do, then the conversation changes and you're open to possibilities. And maybe, for example, if okay, I want a raise, okay, it's not possible. Why not? Do I need to raise my goals, or can we do it a little bit later? But at least you're opening the door.
Yes. And you're getting information. I think the very first question you asked me, what's your definition of negotiations? And I said problem solving. And you can't solve problems without information, right? And so having the opportunity to ask people, and not like why, right? You're not saying why not, but you're saying, okay, I'd love to make this work for you, or I would love to hear more, so that the next time I come to you, I can offer you something that actually does work for you, right? That's a very different kind of thing. That's saying, I want to know more so I can do better, or I want to know more so we can make this work. And that level of information will create opportunities. It opens doors for you, right? Think about it. If somebody just says, you make an ask and somebody says yes, and that's it. Like, you don't really know why they said yes. You don't know why it works for them. But if they say no, and you can go back and say, why not? Then you can actually learn, and then you can do that thing over and over again, because now you know what's important to them. Does that make sense?
Of course. Can you remember a time when you got a no, and then by asking you got a bigger opportunity? Maybe, it should be all the time, but maybe a recent one.
Maybe a recent one. What's really strange is I'm sure I get them all the time, but
you don't see them anymore.
I don't know, but I don't even, because I think a lot of times I don't expect a yes right away.
Okay.
If it's a proposal of some sort, or if it's a conversation about something, I don't go in necessarily thinking right away this person is going to say yes. I think about whatever conversation is going to come out of it. So quite frankly, if I'm going to be totally honest, it's usually conversations with family where I hear the no, and then I have to come back, and they're usually personal conversations. But in terms of sort of my more professional life, I kind of go in thinking, they may not say yes to this. What am I going to do if they don't? And how am I going to work this out with them, right? Or, if there's a speaking engagement, a client wants me to speak at a conference or what have you, and we're giving them pricing for it. I don't always think that if I give them this price, they're going to be like, fantastic. In my mind, I think if they come back with a no, or this doesn't work, where can I be flexible? And so I do that work before I even give them the proposal or make the ask, right? So I hate to say I'm not being pessimistic. I'm just problem solving before I go there, so that I don't take the no as being a personal thing. People don't have the budgets. People don't have the money for it. It may not be the right time, like you said before. So that's what I think about first. And I think that's why when you said, when's the most recent time? I'm thinking I don't really set myself up for feeling like I failed if they say no. I set myself up for, how will we actually make this work?
So pro tip, always think that maybe they will say no, and how will you go around it? So right. That's the thing.
Ask why, so you can get to a yes.
Of course. What is it harder, to negotiate professionally with companies, with athletes, because you have been in sports, or with family?
It depends. And I think I say that because, I've taught so many different types of people. And when I ask them in class, for example, what's harder for you, to negotiate with people you know, or to negotiate with people you don't know? It's really interesting because it's almost 50-50. For some people, they say, if I know the person, I know what's important to them. I have all the information that I need. But if I don't know the person, that means there are things that I did not know or didn't prepare for, and that puts me at a disadvantage. Other people say it's so much harder to negotiate with people that I know because there's emotions involved. There's a connection. And so again, I don't want to cause conflict or or I already know if they say something, how much it'll bother me. And I'm sort of, I get very tense around that, or, again, the conflicts or whatever it is, right? The emotionality, the relationship makes it very difficult for them, or they're pleasers and they don't even want to ask because they don't want to, again, upset the relationship. So I said it depends, because I think it really does. I think some people prefer one to the other. As far as I'm concerned, it takes the same skills. And I think that, yes, there's more emotions involved with people that you know because there's a connection. But there can be emotions with somebody you don't know because you didn't really know the type of person that they are. And maybe they're more aggressive than you had thought they would be. Or maybe they say something that really upsets you and they don't even know they've done that in the conversation. So emotions can come at any time with any person. I think it takes the same skill sets, though, to be successful on both sides.
And now that we have come to this point of family and relationships, actually, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you was something a student of Little Capitalist Pig asked us, because during the pandemic, she was supporting her family, but her mother was just like asking for money, but wouldn't agree to do a budget. So she was like an ATM machine for her mom.
Right.
Why is it so hard for us to set boundaries with our loved ones? Why is it so hard to, especially with the topic of money?
Money. Yeah, money is hard, I think, for everybody. And because it's very transactional, right? I always say it goes two ways. It either goes up or it comes down. There's not a whole lot more to it. So it makes the conversation very difficult. But I think with family, again, if you're somebody that feels like they're my family, I have to take care of them. This is, again, more of that accommodator, pleaser type personality. Then you want to do everything you can to make them feel like they're supported, that they're happy, they're protected. And so when we do that, we haven't set any boundaries because we think that if we set a boundary, it means that we're saying no to them and there's going to be conflict and they're being rejected, right? And we don't want somebody that we care about to feel rejected. And we don't want to cause the conflicts. We don't want to cause fighting in a relationship. So boundaries to those people start to mean if you set a boundary, it's going to mean that it's going to disrupt the relationship. If you set a boundary, it's going to cause fights between you. Whereas I think we have to just think differently about it, because if you give and you give and you give, and it doesn't matter if it's a family member or if it's an employee or whatever it is in a professional situation, then at some point you've given so much that you feel like you've been taken advantage of. And when that happens, then that's going to hurt the relationship, right? So we think we're actually protecting the relationship by giving. But over time, if you keep doing that and you haven't set a boundary or given them sort of rules of engagement, then the more they want and the more you give, at some point you're going to say, oh my God, I can't believe they keep taking from me like this. Well, here's the thing. You didn't set a boundary, so you kept giving. It's not necessarily, people don't take something that you don't want to give. You've given, they take. And I think that when you set a boundary and you think about boundary setting as a place of compassion, as a place of actually strengthening relationships so that you're protecting where they go and how they're established, and you're giving you're asking for mutual respect. Boundaries are very powerful in supporting a relationship, not diminishing a relationship.
There was a quote in your book that said that we are afraid of breaking the relationships, but resentment is a tiny hammer that breaks the relationships in the long term. I loved it because it's a great image. So it's beautiful.
You start resenting people. You get angry with them, but you should actually think about what you're doing to support that bad behavior.
Actually, there's an anecdote in your book about a football player. And I found it very useful because what is told there is that this football player then became a professional coach of a team, and then their family thought, oh, he's a millionaire.
Right.
He has to pay for everything, for school, for my debts, for entertainment, for my health, whatever. And he had a family of his own, so he couldn't do it for everyone.
Right.
And what you tell in that story is that he started to set some boundaries. Okay, I will pay for education, but nothing else, because that's
Right.
what I can do.
Right. Yeah. So yes, he made quite a bit of money as a professional football player, actually, and went on to sort of a longer career and ended up doing coaching and what have you. But this happens a lot to celebrities and entertainers. It happens to these athletes. It happens to lottery winners. It happens to people that come about a lot of money and fortune. And all of a sudden, 40 other people that you never knew were even your cousins or your family members show up at your door, and they want money, and they want, to share in all this sort of prosperity that you've just come across. And it's really unfair in a lot of ways, because it's not like, well, lottery, I guess you're just sort of handed it. But for all those other people, they've worked hard. This is their career. It's not to say just because you're an athlete, you're not working hard. You're working so hard. And you've taken risks, and your body has taken risks, and you've done all that you can to get to this point. So to say to somebody, well, now you're rich, we want money, is so dismissive of all the effort that they have put into it, right? So I think that's the thing, is then you start not trusting people, because you think the only reason they want to be my friend, or the only reason they showed up, is because they want something from me. They want money from me. And I think that's, it's quite unfortunate. And I absolutely do believe that in those situations, to your point about, I'll pay for education, you have to set a boundary. It's almost like when you go to a foundation and ask for, money for whatever cause. They don't just give away money, or the really, sort of successful groups and organizations say, this is important to us, and this is important to us, and we're going to fund this. And whether it's education, whether it's addressing homelessness, whether it's healthcare, and they're not general funders. They are very specific about the things that are important to them. I think we should approach it the same way. I think the athletes, the entertainers, the whoever should say, look, I know that you need support. Maybe you if it's an emergency or what have you, that's fine. But in the long run, if you want my help, these are the things that I can do for you, because you feel like you're making an investment as opposed to they're taking from you.
And actually, that happens a lot to people who take care of their personal finances.
Yeah.
They start becoming like the sponsor of the rest of their family. Well, or at least that's what many of our students say, that,
right.
Okay, I saved so much to have my investment or my house or my emergency fund. And then this person that has one debt and then another debt, another, they always want to borrow from me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very good to understand that you can set a boundary and say, okay, I can help you, but under these different conditions.
I personally think that the more people are educated about their financial health, they have budgets, and they know about sort of how their cash flow works, or, money in, money out of their accounts, how to sort of understand that, how to control that, then I think they're less likely to be the type of person that goes to somebody and says, just give me money, right? Because they have a value, they have an understanding of what this all means, and what it takes to be stable financially, what it takes to have a savings. And you don't think just because they have it, they should give it to me. You start thinking about all of this matters, and it took planning, and it took responsibility. So, they don't owe a debt to me. They came about this in a really honest way. So I think I think people take it for granted, to be honest with you.
It's again to think about your value and what you have put of effort on something. I want to take a little detour, because your experience is so interesting. You have been in the sports arena negotiation for very long. You were even featured as an expert and a leader in the ESPN film 30 for 30 Broke. What have you learned from that particular field that you think that can be used for different people? Because what we see sometimes is that many athletes get checks, or at least we think they get bigger checks maybe than the ones they get, but some of them end up broke.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I think the media is really interesting, because I think a bad story is more attractive than a good story. So I think a lot has been made of sort of athletes going broke, and certainly sort of for that the 30 for 30 that I did for ESPN. But if I really think about it, again, you see so many other people get into financial trouble. And like I said before, anytime you come into wealth, right, you all of a sudden start earning so much more money than you ever did, or, you didn't come from very much, but all of a sudden you are so incredibly well off. I think unless you have the right support system, and unless you have the right people around you, and unless you want to learn more and be more active in your decision making, then it's very easy to make those mistakes. And it's very easy to not invest in, mutual funds or savings, or real estate, but start using your money sort of frivolously, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I have all this money in front of me. So, yes, we have all seen athletes do it, but yes, we've seen entertainers do it. Yes, we've seen executives do it, right? People who run a startup, anybody, I think, and again, lottery winners it's a very interesting story, but there's a lot of stories about people who come into, again, that kind of money, and then poof, it's gone. You have to have a value for it. No matter how quickly you've gotten it, you have to understand what this means, that it's a force that can be used for good, you can have sort of generational wealth, that you can set yourself up for the entirety of your life. Because let's go back to the example of the athletes. They have far shorter careers, like football players, about 3.5 years or so is the longevity of their career. So when they're done playing and those checks go away, it's a pretty young age. So they have to make that wealth. They have to invest in a way to make that money last for a very, very long time. And if you look at it that way, you think, wait, if you calculate this over several years, I really have to be careful, right? And God forbid you get hurt. So the good news is that I've seen less and less of those mistakes. The good news is that I think a lot of these athletes do seek people around them who can support them in a way that makes them better off and makes everybody around them better off, right? In the sense of their families and their future. So I see it less. I think there's more education. I think that there's access to more information because of things like the internet, and there's a wealth of information that people have at their fingertips that they didn't have before. And so the trend is sort of going like this, which is a good thing. But I think everybody has to be careful. Everybody can learn a lesson from that, right? Because, like we just saw in the pandemic, you have it today, it's gone tomorrow. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We can get really sick. We can have a family member that gets sick. Something can happen, you can't work anymore. So just because you have it here doesn't mean that you spend it all and celebrate it. You want to protect that and have it for, your lifetime, so that you can enjoy the rest of your life based on the money that you've come about.
Maybe we will have it in extremes, because we will work for short time and then live a lot of years. I mean, athletes is maybe an extreme, but right. Anybody can have like a very good job in a certain time and then the job is gone, or a good business that goes bankrupt. So having these skills of being money savvy is always important. And I love the fact that you mentioned the pandemic, because of course it had a very wide impact in our priorities and the way we negotiate. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people realized that maybe they were working too hard during the pandemic because we couldn't go out. And now work is maybe the same load and the same pay or whatever. What would you suggest to people that want to negotiate better work-life balances or want to negotiate a raise now because the responsibilities are still as high, but maybe everything stayed the same for them?
You're asking somebody who doesn't have any work-life balance, but maybe that's why I teach it. But I think what the pandemic did, to your point, is make us think about what are the really important things that are really important to us, right? That it just made us think a lot more, right? We were still, we were in our homes, we weren't running around, we had a lot of time to be here. And I think you start valuing your life differently that way, right? You even and with the pandemic, it was not to be dramatic, but it was life and death. And when you start thinking about things that way, then it's almost like every day matters more. And your every moment matters more, and who you choose to spend time with matters more. And things they take on a different level of seriousness. And I think that's what's affected a lot of people, is that they started making choices that would benefit them as a human being, as a wholesome human being. So them as, their happiness, maybe their health, maybe their emotional well-being, maybe their mental health. Cultural aspect of work has changed. We got a long way to go between this push-pull between employees and their employers. And it's been brought about from this notion of people thinking, how am I happiest? And by the way, I can still be effective if I work from home, right? So how do companies resolve that? It's complicated.
But again, you have to bring your information, your research. Okay, I've done this is my productivity, and follow the steps of this book, of course. And it will be very, very useful. Do you have any particular advice or something that can be useful if you are negotiating with somebody who has a very aggressive type, and maybe you feel a bit intimidated?
Yeah, and the word aggressive is really interesting, right? Because what does that mean? Some people are more hard charging, some people are more driven, and
or a bit pushy.
Or pushy or bullying, so there's all different kinds of categories there. But I think if you really think about it, the person who has that sort of typeset that you just talked about, they're very self-involved, right? I mean, at an extreme, they're a narcissist, but they're very self-involved. So they want to take care of themselves. They put their needs ahead of everybody else's. And for them, it's all about winning in that way. And as a result, I always think, because they are looking at it through this narrow of a lens, the discussion from that narrow of a lens, if you come in and you're thinking about all of it, right, then you're probably a lot more in tune with everything that they're saying. You're a lot more aware of their, whether it's an emotion, whether it's something that is important to them, whether it's what sets them off. Because while you're being emotionally intelligent and while you're paying extreme attention to them, they're just looking at themselves. You're almost not relevant. And I think that actually, as opposed to feeling like you're so intimidated, it could be to your advantage, dare I say to your advantage, because if you can hold your own ground, if you can come in understanding this has to be from a place of you understand your own value. You consider yourself to be an important part of this conversation. But if you do that, you're coming in and paying a lot of attention to this person. And one, they probably like that, right? You're listening to them. They probably like that. You're asking questions about themselves. They like that. And then you can also spend your time being very strategic while they don't see a lot of things. They may miss a lot of things. You've prepared better in a lot of ways. So, I always think, don't be put off by it in terms of, oh my God, they're gonna overpower me. Think about it as maybe mentally and strategically, I'm actually the one in power because I see the entirety of this picture.
Great, that's awesome. Just a strange question, Mori, if you could trade places with any historical or fictional character that you consider a great negotiator, who would that be?
I think I said it before. I think it's hard not to say, and I say it in my book. I mean, I think Nelson Mandela sort of embodied everything that I see in my mind as a great negotiator. And going back to the question you just asked me, I don't want people to think I'm saying it's easy to negotiate with somebody who's difficult or a bully or aggressive. It's not, right? Because at some point, if you feel disrespected, you walk away, right? You say, I can't do this. But if you think about a Nelson Mandela, he negotiated with people who had imprisoned him. And, it's not because he liked these people, obviously. He did it for something so much bigger. And I think that's something, first of all, it's amazing. But what he achieved, I mean, he basically dismantled apartheid. But what he achieved was even more, I think, amazing, fantastic, exceptional, because of the fact that they were his adversaries. And there are many other examples in history of people who have been in the same situation as him and did not actually accomplish the same outcome. And I think things like ego get in the way. I think things like, you miss your humanity. Even if the person is sort of the enemy sitting across your table, you don't allow yourself to disassociate from them. You still stay curious. You still stay committed to this process. And that takes a real control and understanding of your ego, and takes actually a lot of quiet confidence. You are very grounded. You are very established in who you are and what you're bringing to the table. And so, it's hard to come up with another example. And there are many, but it's hard to come up with another example that's so wholesome as from where he came to where he took the history, really, and never losing sight of that, and having the wherewithal to rise above something that was so painful, is quite extraordinary. So when people say that's a really hard negotiations, we can't get it done, that was like the hardest of all negotiations, right? So I don't know. I think I've studied it a lot. I've read a lot of books and different scenarios in the process of his negotiations, and time again, I just stand back and I say, "Wow, extraordinary."
Well, if you need inspiration, that's a great inspiration. And just related to that, and that's my very last question. I would love to sit here 10 hours and ask you so many things, but well, we really need to respect both your time and this time you gave us for the channel. I love one section of your book that says that you shouldn't allow your scars to define you when negotiating. Fear to failure, past events, if you were in an environment of lack of trust. And that was, I think, very beautiful because it gives a lot of possibilities. Mm-hmm. What would be your advice for people not to let their scars to define them in their choices and in their negotiations?
The first thing is that if you allow sort of your past experiences, let's say what you define as being your failures, challenges to define you, then you are less likely to want to negotiate at all, right? Because it sort of damaged that part of you that says, okay, I'll just keep going. And that was hard, but maybe I learned something from it. What it does is actually it keeps you, I think, from understanding what you learned, how that has actually benefited you, because you see it as a scar as opposed to something to be, proud of. The fact that you have gotten past it, the fact that you are here today, the fact that you had perseverance, I think is really what we should focus on, as opposed to seeing everything from a place of winning or losing, or success or failure, because it's true. Every time, even in negotiations, when you do something and it leads to not such a great outcome, If you actually think about it and you learn from it, then you're likely to never make that same mistake again. So therefore you're getting better. But if you make some kind of a mistake and you're thinking, oh my God, like I will never want to do this again with this person, for example, then it's taking away an opportunity, or many opportunities. And I think that is a far greater risk to ourselves, because it keeps us from growing. It may keep you from, okay, so maybe that one negotiations didn't go with this person, but does that mean you can't ever go back and look at another scenario? So I think we punish ourselves in a way that is truly unfair to us. And if we could just not be as hard on ourselves and have a little bit more compassion and have a little bit more grace for ourselves and say, those scars aren't tattoos. They were just a learning opportunity, right? They shouldn't stick on us and feel like they never go away. We've learned something and we've grown from them.
Well, Mori, that was very, very useful. Thank you so much. And really, all of you, please read Bring Yourself, or in Spanish, Esto es Personal. You can get it in an ebook, and you will have a nice surprise from our YouTube channel soon. So please, please, please leave a comment on what you thought of this video. Mori, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. Really, you came about during some of the darkest days of the pandemic, and you sort of like appeared out there supporting my book. And it really, I need you to know that it was very meaningful to me, and I'm so grateful, especially doing the work that you do. And yes, my book was translated, so to have sort of somebody who, benefited from it and talks about it is really, really, it was very important to me. So I'm so grateful for your generosity of spirit. I am.
No, you're more than welcome. This is a masterpiece. And please, please subscribe to Mori's newsletter on LinkedIn. I love it. I read her every time she posts. So thank you so much, Mori.
Thank you so much, Sofía. You take care of yourself.